Anthony, right?
Yep, Anthony. Yep. All right. Yeah, you're good. All right, everybody. What's up? Welcome back to the podcast. Today I have Max McCoy joining me, and first things first. Thank you. We were just trying to get something going on Zoom, and things were getting kind of crazy, so we had to call an audible. So I appreciate you bearing with me, and I really really do. I appreciate your time. So for those who don't know Max, he's a guy that number one I'm interested in, and that I really was wanting to talk to because he's all about psychology, performance, things like that. He has a podcast called Looking Up. It's really, really good. I want to talk to you a little bit about that too. He's a content creator. He's just a little bit of everything. And I really, really, one of the main reasons that I like doing this is because I'm able to talk to people that I'm interested in. I obviously love basketball. Basketball is what I do. I know you have a background in basketball as well. But to me, like that overall self-improvement, self-optimization. Like I'm really into that, and I have a bachelor's degree in psychology. So, I've been coming across your content, and I know I reached out a while back trying to get you on, and things happen, and I was like, man, you're at the top of my list as soon as we're able to, match schedules. So first things first, thank you, man. I really, really appreciate you taking the time.
Cool, man. Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So, what I want to do first is just kind of let you, give yourself a brief introduction for maybe those that don't know exactly who you are or kind of what you do, and then I want to just dive in. Like I said, I got a lot of places I want to go, and but first, tell people kind of your background, your story, briefly, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, like you, I come from the basketball world, man. So that was my first passion, my first love. I dedicated everything to it, and it was a really cool vehicle for me to try to be the best version of myself I could be. And like I modeled people like Kobe Bryant and Steve Nash, and these were guys that taught me so much about discipline and putting in the work and putting in repetition. And so since a young age, I've had a very big obsession with performance and kind of the ways in which I can optimize performance. And I really liked, even from a young age, trying to optimize my body, making sure I took stretching serious and recovering serious. And, we know guys like LeBron James now are investing millions of dollars into their recovery. And so I always kind of took note to that. Beyond basketball, I played college ball for only 1 year, had an injury, transitioned out of the sport at 20 years old. And that's when I think a lot of my real big growth started to happen. I started to really take serious other things, like when you transition out of something that is your whole world, like basketball was for me, and you give it your whole heart, when that's not in your life anymore, a lot of things change. And so for me, I went through what a lot of people call like the dark night of the soul, where you are kind of lost. You don't know what's next. I don't know where I'm going in my life. I was in college, but didn't know what I wanted to do. And there's so much pressure at that age between like 18 and 22 of what are you going to do? What are you going to study? What's your job going to be after this? And so there was all this pressure I put on myself, the pressure from the adults in my life putting on me. There was this void in my life that basketball couldn't fill anymore. And so I really started turning to these personal development tools and ideas and perspectives and practices, and really started to find myself in them. And I really started to think, like, why were these tools and perspectives and practices never taught to me at a younger age? Why am I having to go dig myself or pull myself out of this hole? Why wasn't I ever taught things like how to take care of my mind and the nature of my emotions, and maybe that there are other options out there besides the ones that school tells you there are? And so a big part of my journey started from basketball, but really more so the transition out of it, how I found myself in that, and the tools and perspectives that helped. And then being able to look back and say, I wish I had some of these perspectives while I was still playing basketball. We're starting to see how mental health and mental performance really do come into sports. And so I've loved helping athletes with the mental side of the game. But now, moving beyond basketball, I'm just super passionate, like you said, about all things psychology and kind of personal development, because I think it's what so many of us need but aren't receiving at a younger age. And so I've very much been dedicated to, like you said, all these different worlds and all these different projects I have going on. I would say the common theme is I am learning and doing the work that I thought I needed at a younger age, and I'm trying to be that person for myself that I didn't have, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I know that you did a lot of stuff with David Nurse, who is the guy that has been a mentor to me. We've never met, but I know we communicate sometimes. I'm going to get him, on eventually. I know he just released his book, so things are kind of wild for him right now. But he's kind of the guy that I want to be like. You know, I was listening to your podcast you had on your most recent one about how books can help you understand. You know, if you want to be like that person, go read a book about them or a book they wrote or something like that. And that's kind of my approach I'm taking with a guy like David. Is I was in the same boat as you. I was basketball. I actually played for a year in college as well, and obviously I do more on court stuff. But the older I get, and the more I experience different things and talk to different people, it really is all about overall optimization. And I like that word because that's so true. You know, if you're healthy, on the floor, off the floor, in your everyday life, all that thing, all those types of things, I feel like it really, really adds up and helps your performance ultimately on the court. So that's why a guy like David is a really, really, like I said, a mentor, because he's doing just that. He's not come talk to me and we'll go do some court, drills on the court. I'm going to help you with your nutrition, with your sleep. One of the most positive individuals I know, in terms of always bringing energy, which that's incredible because I like to consider myself pretty positive, but he puts me to shame, in that department in terms of just being, on cloud nine every day. And that's something, like I said, that I was really interested about you, but something I want to talk to you about since I brought up that last podcast about the books. When did you start, really, really reading books? And more importantly, when did you start reading to understand the books? Because I know that's a big thing you guys also talked about in that podcast was we all could go read a book or listen to a book. But how long does that information stay with us? Probably not that long, right? So when did you really start taking it seriously, I guess we could put it, and read books? And then how were you able to apply that, like to your daily life?
Well, speaking of David Nurse, you should go get his book, Pivot and Go. It just came out. I have to plug my friend. David's a good friend. So that's awesome that he's one of the most positive guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, the books, it was like I said in the introduction, I finished with basketball. I was very lost. I would say that was like the most lost I've ever been. And I started to be like, okay, what might be next? And I started to really think about the people I admire. If you're lost in life and there's all this pressure on what do you want to do with your life, instead of like looking for the exact thing, maybe just start learning from the people that you naturally gravitate to. Like for you, David Nurse. For me, it was Kobe Bryant because I loved basketball. Tim Ferriss, who is like an author, entrepreneur, podcaster. I just love his approach to performance and self-learning. And then the third was like Steve Jobs. For some reason, he's this mythical entrepreneur character at a young age. I thought he was cool. So I studied these guys and I just would read articles about these guys. And I realized they all had this like one thing in common, which was they all meditated. And I was like, meditation's kind of a weird thing. It's kind of a woo-woo thing. And this was 5 years ago, so it's a little more normal now. But the first thing I did was like, okay, I'll learn about that. If all three of the guys that I think are, the people I want to be more like, and they had this entrepreneurial life, let me start reading about this thing that they all talk about, which was meditation. So I got my first book. It was like a kind of a Zen-like Buddhism book when I was 20 years old. And that was the first book that I would say I was like, treated it like, oh my gosh, I just read a book and I'm a different person now. And I had never felt that before because in school and in life, people are telling you what to read and you're just kind of like, okay, I'll read it, but you're not into it. And I think it really starts to change for myself and for anybody is when you take that book and you start applying it and you actually start seeing ways that the pages that you're reading can impact your life today. And so for me, once that I saw that happen, that I realized was a repeatable outcome. That is something that whatever I want to get better at, in this case, it was meditation, but then it went on to be creativity and then entrepreneurship and then, mindset and personal development, health, anything I wanted to get better at. There was a book out there that I could find and really start applying to my life immediately. So it was really once I started finding personal development books, really like not reading novels, which I know have benefits for people and, reading novels are great. It wasn't reading textbook. It wasn't reading scientific literature. It was for me taking an author's piece of writing. And if you think about it, an author spent years and years, decades condensing all their work into sometimes just 200 pages, which is so hard to do. to condense all the work you've ever done in your life to 200 pages. That means they've really refined it for me and they've cut out all the BS for me. And so I'm just taking the best parts, and then they've made it really easy for me to implement into my life. And so once I started reading personal development books, man, that's when it all changed. And that was about 5 years ago.
Yeah, and so let me ask you this: the last thing about the books I want to ask you, if I'm
Yeah.
if I'm a player right now, or even a coach, whatever the case may be, even a person, just someone trying to get better, what books would you recommend? Let's say, give me top three of books that you'd recommend for the everyday person, an athlete, a coach, whatever, generally speaking.
That's always a hard question because on that podcast you listened to, we did talk about this idea that one thing that's difficult with people is, and why they might not like reading initially, is because you'll just say, oh, I don't like reading. What book do you like? And your taste and my taste can be so different. True. And so if you give me your favorite book and I hate it, that often will leave me saying, oh, see, like I'm not a reader. But that's not the case. And so I will encourage, as Nick did on my podcast, people to think of who do you admire, and go read a book about them, or go read a book written about them. If not them, if that's not the case, and if you don't have someone in mind, maybe go think of a skill that you want to get really good at, whether it's like a mindset. I want to be better mindset wise in basketball, or I want to be more creative, or I want to be a better communicator. And then go Google top books for blank, whatever that thing you want to get better at is. Pick one of the top books and then read that, and you'll be able to apply that knowledge into your life immediately, and you'll see the benefits, and you'll be like, oh my gosh, this book can apply directly to my life. But if I had to, I'm going to answer your question. I'm not going to dance around it. I would say Stillness is the Key. Stillness is the Key by Ryan Holiday is a really easy read. It's short chapters, and it's a really good overview book about Stoic philosophy, which is basically like ancient wisdom from all the great kings and warriors in history kind of followed this philosophy. And it's all about how stillness can improve your life, your performance, and anything you want to do. And it's really practical. So I would say that book. And for athletes, high performers, coaches, that's a really good book. In terms of everyday person, and a book that was really influential for me, especially early on, I think, like I said, there's all this pressure about what you're going to do with your life and where you're going in life and needing to have all the answers. A book I really like, which is actually a fiction, it's a fable type book, is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. It's, I'd say, still like my favorite of all time. Super simple read. It's about a young man finding his way. It's about a young man finding his treasure. As uncertain as he is, he just is following the signs, and he begins to learn that he's being led. And that is a book that's really been impactful for me. So those are the two I would start with no context to what the listener wants. I would give them those two for sure.
Yeah, no, that was a trap question. That was a tough question for you. I was wondering what you were gonna say, if you had anything since then. I was thinking, I don't know if I should ask him this, but we'll see what he says, because I literally heard you say, everyone's different. Everyone's different on that podcast, and I was like, I'll try it. But
yeah, why not?
Exactly. But now, kind of transitioning, but staying on the same topic, I know you're big into journaling, and that's something that I've actually just started to do, and I've tried to follow some different things, and but I've personally, I'm not sure how you do it, but I'm obviously would like to know, but I personally just kind of like to open the book and just write. Some days, I could write a whole page, 2 pages, 3, whatever. Some days I write a couple sentences. Just what's going on. What's going on in my life. What maybe it's something I have to do that day or that week. Just kind of let it all out. And that's something that everyone does it differently. I know I spoke to a few people about like writing 3 things you're grateful for, 3 things you want to do today. 5 things that you need to accomplish by the end of the week. Everyone's different. It's very individual. But you personally, how do you like to do that, and what does that look like for you in terms of when you do it, maybe the environment you're in? I know for me, part of my morning routine is I come down, I read the Daily Stoic every morning. That's one of my, I wouldn't consider that a book, but I guess I could, but I like reading that every morning. So I'll read that, and then I'll journal as soon as I get back from working out, because that's something I really like to try to get my headspace right for the day. Now,
that's awesome.
What does yours look like? How do you do that?
So my journaling practice evolves, and for me, like I'm big about having a daily practice that cultivates my mind and my spirit. I kind of put those two in the same category. So making sure whatever it is I'm doing, I'm spending, at least 30 minutes a day, kind of dialing myself in and calibrating myself so that the rest of the day I'm not in this reaction mode. I'm in the driver's seat of my own life. Journaling is one of my favorite ways to do that. It's like you said, there's so many ways to go about it. It can help you cultivate gratitude. It can help you overcome fear. It can help you with productivity. And so I've gotten my journaling practice so dialed in that I can go to my journal saying, what outcome am I looking for right now? And I can almost reverse engineer that. And I have all these processes through questions I ask myself, through prompts, through exercises that I've accumulated over the years, that I can really go to my journal and say, okay, today I just need to be productive. And I'll ask myself thought-provoking questions, something like, what is the one thing that needs to get done today, no matter what? What is the only thing I need to focus on today, and everything else is extra? That's like a productivity question. But to give you a better answer in terms of like my journaling practice when I'm really full-fledged, it's kind of like what you said, man. I just sit down and write. And if people are kind of like, oh, journaling's kind of weird, or like, I don't see how that would help me, journaling is one of those tools that essentially just splits your mind wide open. And you have this unconscious going on throughout your day, and you have these thoughts bouncing around all day. And there's tools like meditation that can kind of help you drop into a more calm state. But journaling is so powerful because it really allows you to see your thoughts on paper. And that's one of the most powerful things. I'm sure you've experienced this.
Absolutely.
When you sit down, you think, you're stressed about this one thing. You sit down, you write about it, and then you realize you just wrote, a page or 2 pages, and you realize there's all these other things coming out of you that you didn't expect. And that is kind of you giving your subconscious mind the opportunity to come out while journaling. So I would say the foundation of my practice, and I don't do it every day anymore, but I definitely recommend people at least play with this in some area of their life, whether it's in the morning like you do it, or before bed is another good time to do it. Because if you journal before bed, you're getting those thoughts out of your head and onto paper, which allows you to almost fall asleep easier because you're not in your head. But just sit down and commit to, I'm going to write 1 full page or 2 full pages. And even though I sit down and I don't know what I'm going to write about before I sit down, just write and force yourself to keep moving your pen on paper. And the more you do that, the more you'll see, I don't need to know what I'm going to write about. The simple act of showing up with my pen and paper and writing is going to allow my subconscious to come out. It's going to allow my thoughts to get out of my head and onto paper. And man, that is so powerful because you'll start to have clarity as to what's going on in your head. And you'll start to see patterns. If you do this for 2 weeks, you might see after 3, 5, 6 days, oh, I seemingly have these anxious tendencies. I seem to get scared of the same things. I seem to always be stressed about the future. And you'll start to be able to almost talk to yourself. You'll be able to talk to your subconscious mind, start to put perspective on the things that you feel like are such a big deal. There's this weird thing that happens that when you journal about something, in your head, it feels so important and stressful and fearful. But then the second you get it onto paper, you're able to see it objectively. It's like if you were to tell me your problems, I could give you some really good advice. But I have trouble giving myself advice because my problems feel so much bigger. They feel emotionally charged. So journaling allows me to see my problems as if they were someone else's, and I can give myself advice on the journal. So so many benefits, man. But I would say, yeah, the foundation of my practice isn't any container, rather than it's just sitting down and writing. It's just getting myself to do it. And, I've gone months and months where I'll do something called the morning pages. And the first thing in the morning, I'll sit down and I'll write, multiple full pages of writing without thinking. It's called stream of consciousness writing. And you just express whatever's on your mind onto paper. And it's so powerful, especially if you can do that consistently. There are scientific studies proving that it can help reduce anxiety. It can help improve overall sense of well-being. It helps you process trauma. It helps, productivity. Like there are studies to this. And so super powerful practice that if anybody in my community follows me, they know I'm passionate about it, because for me, it's been that Swiss Army knife tool that has allowed me so much freedom in my mind and then everything else I do.
Yeah, and everything you just said was extremely powerful, especially when you mentioned the idea of that pen to paper. There's something, even when I was, in school, people would have laptops and they'd have computers, and I was always a note taker with a notebook, and
Mm.
then you move forward, and I'm a big goal guy, and one of the most effective ways, I studied goals when I was in school. One of the most effective ways to achieve a goal is to write it down. And,
Yeah.
and that's something I tell my players all the time that I work with, or even people in general. If you really want to do something, you got to do one of two things. You got to put it out there. You got to put it out in the universe, tell someone, to hold you accountable. Or, my recommended would be write it down. If you there's something like you said about that simple pen to paper and just kind of write it down, and then you have it somewhere where you look at it and that holds you accountable. It's very, very, very powerful in my opinion.
Yeah, man. And what is for you? What is the benefit? I mean, that's an awesome practice you have, reading the stoicism in the morning and reading that wisdom and then journaling about it. What have you seen to be one of the big takeaways after doing that consistently? I know I'm sure it kind of adjusted. In the beginning, it was one thing, but now that you've been doing it consistently, what have you noticed?
I'll be honest. When I first started doing it, because I've probably been doing it for about 2.5 years now, a little bit under 3 years. And when
Oh,
I
nice.
first started doing it, like you said, I was kind of like, I'm skeptical. I don't really want to do this, so I was kind of making myself do it. It was like, listen, I'm gonna wake up, and that's part of my morning routine. I have to do it. It was one of those things where I have to get that done. And it almost gave me, anxiety, because it was like, if I don't wake up and I don't, work out, come home and shower and sit down and, read my daily stoic and journal. And then as I got to doing it more and more, I looked at it from a different perspective, I guess I could say. It wasn't I have to do this. It was I get to do this. And then it got to the point where every passage is different. And man, some days it's creepy how spot on it is for that day. It's almost like, okay, this is very strange. This is fitting, whether it's my mood, whether it's the day, whether it's something I have going on in my life, whatever it is. And the past year, I've actually started highlighting things. I'm a big highlighter guy in terms of in the book. And now looking back on it, because obviously there's only 365 pages because there are 365 days in a year, I get to see what I highlighted before, and I find myself highlighting new things within that passage. And to me, that kind of shows that now I'm understanding it in a deeper level. I'm
Mm.
looking at it now like, oh, that stuck out because it was a quote. So eventually I probably thought, oh, it's a quote, it must be important. When I first started, now it's like I'm highlighting things that the first time I read it, I didn't think anything of.
Mm.
And I think the biggest thing with journaling for me is that the idea of gratitude. I don't, I'm not going to say I struggle with that, but there's days, just like everyone else, that you don't really harness that and you don't really understand that. And I think that's one of the big things with me, because I part of my journal at the end of, when I'm done writing, kind of spilling my brain, I go, 3 things I'm grateful for every day. And, taught most of the time, 2 things remain the same. That's my family, that's my health. And then that third one, I like to kind of get a little creative with, and kind of the mood I'm feeling. And something interesting about journaling is, when I was in high school, my senior year, and I actually just found the notebook the other day, I was journaling, not even realizing it. I would write down my thoughts before each game, my senior year in high school. And it's
Mm.
funny looking back at that and reading what was going on in my mind. There was a couple that were, oh, you only scored, 12 points last game. You got to score more points, and it's stuff like that. And that shows me how much I've evolved.
Mm.
Like I'm not writing in my journal, I got to make sure I do this and that as far as basketball goes. I'm writing in my journal about things I need to do on my daily life. How do I need to be a better person? What do I have to do to be more grateful? Because sometimes, like I said, we fall in life. Sometimes you get caught up doing things, and you're not expressing that gratitude like you should. And so that's kind of a long-winded answer, but my idea of journaling is simply starting my day off in the right mindset, and starting my day off with something, like I said, that I can relate to. Because for whatever reason, that book is something I recommend anyone picking up. It's literally called The Daily Stoic. It's a great it's a page. Every day is a page, and every day is something new. There's different categories for each month. So like one month will be all about gratitude. One month will all be about accountability, different things like that. And so if you're on the fence about journaling, I would 110% recommend it. Like you said, the hardest part is just getting started.
Yeah, man. And I like that I highlight all my books, and it's a good way to be able to flick back through it in the future and see which parts stood out. That way, if you wanted just a refresher, you have the parts highlighted. But I've also it's funny you said that, because I experience that all the time, man. I'll look over my old books and I'll read them again. We talked about, the podcast I did all about reading, and one of the best ways to make sure something you learn is ingrained in you is to revisit that information frequently. So I'll reread some of the most impactful books. I'll try to read them off, once a year maybe. And it's cool to see how the parts I highlighted the first time I read them, I'm like, oh, like I thought that was a really standout part. That seems so simple. That seems so like low hanging fruit. And then the third time I read it, I'm like, okay, like it's really cool to see how your learning evolves. Yeah, exactly. Man. And then the journaling, it's a journaling. One of the, simple benefits, like you said, you are archiving your thoughts for your future self. So if you want to be able to look into your psyche from the past, like it's essentially time traveling. So I started journaling when I was traveling, and all these cool things were happening to me, and I just was like, I want to remember every detail because I know I'm going to forget this. So I would spend every night kind of recording my day, and I realized, that was cool, but what was really cool was how I was pouring out my thoughts. And I have journals from the last 5 years now, and to be able to look back and be like, what was Max like 1 year ago from today? And I can go to my journal and pick out the prompt from, whatever 2019, and I can see exactly what I was worried about, what I was excited about, what was going on in my life. And to have that, I think, is like one of the coolest ways to measure the progress of your psyche, of your life, to catch patterns in your life. It's such a cool thing, man.
I love that. And that's the same idea, like I just said with me, it's looking back when I was in high school, like how much I've evolved, in terms of what I cared about. Like I cared about, and again, you're in high school, you don't have as many worries, but still that idea of, like you said, when, the ball stops bouncing eventually, so what are you doing? And that's why I'm really, really into, how I can optimize not only my, my coaching, court stuff, but my life. And that kind of transitions me to my next question then. And you kind of briefly mentioned it, but why psychology? What was so interesting to you that kind of pulled you and attracted you?
Cool question. Sometimes the best questions are so simple, like, huh.
Yeah.
My mom was a social worker growing up, and so she definitely was, that had a huge psychology component to it. She was really aware of people, and my mom was she could tell me, if someone, like, say, was on the autistic scale and I couldn't even notice it, she would be like, oh yeah, like he's on the scale, or this person must have this. And so she was really good at identifying people and then attaching their behavior to some sort of thought pattern, or even if it was like some sort of disorder they had, or, so I always found that interesting, and I want to give that credit, because I do think, like, I wouldn't think like this if I didn't have a mom from a young age pointing out, the different whys to people were the way they were. And I thought that was fascinating. Why is this person like that? Why is that person like that? I also have had, my younger brother has been incredibly mentally ill for the majority of my life. He's had an incredibly challenging life, incredibly difficult challenges with mental health. And my older sister as well has suffered with, severe depression. I've even gone through bits of depression. And so with the mom being like labeling that and giving it symptoms and almost identifying it as like because of her traditional background in school, she would be quick to label my siblings as sick, and she would tell us, this is just like a chemical imbalance. You were probably born this way. And that's kind of the old mold and the old methodology to psychology, I would say. I think that's outdated, but bless her heart, that's what she learned, that's what she studied. So she was just giving her children the best of her knowledge. But I grew up, intuitively feeling like that wasn't right. And I didn't feel like my younger brother and my older sister were just born that way. I did feel like life circumstances and the way they grew up and getting addicted to certain thought patterns really had a big part as to why they were the way they were. And then when I would say after graduating college, I had almost similarly to finishing basketball, graduating college was similar in that it left me feeling like, now what? And I dropped pretty low at 22 years old and went to the doctor because my mom was like, oh, you should probably just go make sure, you don't have any chemical imbalances. And so I went to the doctor, and within 5 minutes, this doctor prescribes me very, very strong antidepressants. He didn't ask me about my diet. He didn't ask me about my lifestyle, my sleep. He just said, oh, you're sad sometimes? Yeah, yeah. Are you ever anxious in social situations? Yeah, yeah. Do you have trouble sleeping sometimes? And I would argue that every person listening to this would say yes to those questions. We're all sad sometimes. We'll all get socially anxious sometimes, and we all have trouble sleeping sometimes. And so right on the spot, he prescribed me antidepressants. And that really turned me, I'm so grateful for that because that turned me into kind of an investigator. What was I just prescribed? Why is he telling me to take these? So I started doing research on SSRIs, which are antidepressants, which, like up to, I think, almost 40% of the population are taking those. My younger brother was on them since he was 15 years old. Same with my sister. And they were hooked. They can't get off of those now. So I was fascinated by that. And I decided to not take the medication I was prescribed. And that led me down this deep, deep wormhole of what makes people, chemically, like what affects our neurochemicals, our neurochemistry, what impacts like just the way we feel about life, maybe beyond a chemical level. And so that really, it was this combination between my mom's perspective on the psyche, how I felt like that was really allowed me to get curious about it, but then also wanting to stray away from her generation's approach of chemical imbalances and the traditional medication system. And so, yeah, man, that has been, just my story, man. That's what got me excited about psychology.
And then, so you obviously took that from a personal standpoint. Now, as far as performance goes, is that just in your background in terms of athletics because of basketball or things like that? So then when that happens, so that moment happens, right, and you're really intrigued by it, did your mindset go to, okay, if I can figure this out, in an everyday life situation, is there a way that I could also help athletes in terms of performance, whether that's on the court or in whatever sport they may be in?
Yeah, so starting with basketball, like I said, that was my initial obsession with performance. And obviously the mental side of that is a part of it. And so when I was playing basketball, the whole mental side I was trying to cultivate was that Mamba, Kobe Bryant, like mentality, just an absolute warrior, like mind over matter. And then transitioning out of basketball, the obsession with psychology really blossomed. And so I was like, why are some people happy and why are some people depressed? And like I said to start the conversation, everything I do is almost kind of looking back at younger Max, who he was and what he needed, and trying to almost help him with that. I would say definitely I realized that, man, all that I'm learning in the psychology world, imagine if Max, while he was playing basketball, knew this. It would have helped his performance. And in teaching people that are in athlete, like when you're an athlete, you're willing to learn anything to get better. That's why Kobe adopted meditation. It wasn't so he could become like this centered, grounded person. It was because he wanted to do anything he could to be the best basketball player he could. But I would argue his meditation practice served him far beyond basketball. And that's why he went on to be such a grounded, well-rounded person. That's why he could dive into those creative ideas. That's why he was one of the best examples as to what transitioning out of sports looks like. And so I would look back and say, not only will these practices that I'm learning can help my psychology, not only would that help younger Max just be a better version of Max and would have helped him transition through life a little more seamlessly, but it would have helped his performance too. And so I think recognizing that it's a good way to reach people. It's saying, hey, take this tool. It's really going to help you be a better athlete, which is what you care about. And then when you're done with that sport, when you're done with that container, it'll serve you after too. And I think, we all learn through sports what discipline is, what hard work is, communication, leadership. And so I think it's a really cool opportunity now to see different parts fill in, psychology, mental health. All these things are starting to come together so that athletes are given more of a chance after sports to be well-rounded people.
Now, let me ask you this. As an athlete, and again, this is a loaded question, but as an
For
athlete, if I'm trying to adopt some of these practices we've been talking about, whether that's journaling, meditation, reading, whatever the case may be, where do I start? Because I get that question all the time. Because guys like me and you, we've been doing a lot of that for a while. Meditation is something I'm still playing with. I'm not gonna lie. It's tough for me to. It's tough for me to relax. It's tough for me to really try to clear my mind and really do that. And so I'm working on that. But journaling, things like that, you tell them what you do, and to someone who's never done that, they look at you like, I can't do that. What I can't go write 3 pages, every morning or 4 pages. So number one, I guess, would be how would you list them in terms of priority? And then number 2, how do you attack each of them? How do you kind of start, in essence, how do you walk before you can run?
That's a good question. So I love James Clear. He's the author of Atomic Habits. And he says that, one of the most effective ways to build a new habit isn't to, like you said, start with the big, I'm going to write 5 pages a day. If you want to run a marathon, you don't start by practicing the marathon. You start by running for 1 minute a day for a week, and then maybe 2 minutes a day for a week, and then 3 minutes a day for a week. And then, after a month, you can start to build the identity of someone who runs. Even if you only run for a few minutes a day, if you do it every single day, after a month, the biggest thing that you want to accomplish in that first month of a new habit is to change your identity. So for you, if meditation is very difficult, I would encourage you, meditate for 1 minute a day. And then after a month, someone asks, hey, do you meditate? You would say, yeah, oh yeah, I meditate. Like, I don't do it super long, but I meditate every single day. And your identity is now tied with that habit. And that gives you a better chance moving forward to really allow that habit to impact your life. So with athletes specifically, totally this is a lot, but I think athletes, if we give them more credit, they intuitively know that they want to improve their mindset. It's what holds so many people back from being at that level of performance they want to be at. So journaling and meditation, I would say, are the 2 big ones. You hit them. Meditation specifically, like you said, it can be difficult. It's the hardest one because we are so trained to be in this reactionary mode, almost this, it's called sympathetic. It's like a stress response. We're always kind of like up, breathing up here and hyperventilative type. We're really reactionary. Meditation is difficult because you're trying to sit with yourself and basically train yourself to down regulate and just like breathe and relax. And training ourselves to relax is very difficult. But I would offer you the perspective of, I have a dog, and training that dog when he was a puppy taught me a lot about, training myself, and that you just have to show up consistently. Like if you're training a dog or a horse or an animal, you don't expect to sit down with that wild animal and expect them to be super calm right away. But if you sit down with that wild horse, every day for 5 minutes, the first week he might just be ridiculous, but you're still going to do it because he's getting more comfortable with you. And then maybe the second week he gets a little less crazy. So I would say with meditation, the low-hanging fruit and where to start, a good place to start is, one, have the perspective that it's going to be difficult to sit down with yourself and in your mind for 5 to 10 minutes a day. And that's okay. And the fact that it's difficult doesn't mean it's not working. So give it time to work. I would say the easiest place to start is to use guided meditations. So guided meditations is where you put on your headphones and there's a professional talking you through exactly what to do. I think that takes away a lot of the thinking, like, am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? You will have all doubts removed. You just sit down, you put your headphones in and follow the instructions. It's like going to the gym for the first time. It's a good idea to have a trainer or a spotter so that you're not going to hurt yourself. You're not going to hurt yourself with meditation. There's no wrong way to do it, but it's helpful to have someone there guiding you. And those guided meditations, you could literally Google or YouTube 10-minute guided meditation. I would say 10 minutes a day with meditation is the easiest place to start. And then with journaling, maybe try every night before. So meditation is a great morning thing to really anchor yourself to start the day in a more, put yourself in the driver's seat. Make sure you're the driver of your mind. 10 minutes in the morning. I would challenge you to do it before you like scroll on Instagram, because it's very hard to get silent in your head after scrolling on Instagram. I'm talking to myself. But and then journaling, try to write a half a page before bed. Like half a page, no matter what you're going to write about. Before bed, you're winding down, you do whatever you got to do, you put your phone away, your alarm's on for the day. Now write a half a page. You could write about the day you just had. You could write about maybe something that you're worried about. You could write what you're grateful about. And I would argue that you might end up writing more than a half a page. But going back to that James Clear example, if you just write a half a page every day and do that for months, like, you are going to see the benefits and it's going to become a part of your identity. And I think you're going to start to see real results. And these might sound like simple and easy and like, oh, like, but no, like, these will impact your performance. If you're an athlete and you're meditating and you're learning to quiet your mind, that is going to be so beneficial to how you play on the court. If you get upset on the court when the ref makes a bad call, or you make a bad shot, or you miss a bad shot, or you have a turnover, or like your teammate's doing something like funky, and those are moments that you are being offered to get off of your axis, and you're essentially getting lost in thought, and then you're stuck in the mistake, or you're stuck ruminating about it. But that meditation practice is going to help you come back to the present moment and focus on the next play, because that's easier said than done. When people say, hey, just focus on the next play, every basketball player knows it's not that easy. You have to train yourself to do that. That is a muscle, to be able to come back and to let go of distractions. Meditation is like a bicep curl for your brain, teaching you how to come back to the present moment and teaching you how to let go of distractions. And to be able to let go of distractions is going to serve you in every aspect of your life. And then journaling is going to help kind of regulate your emotions and just kind of keep you in a more grateful, like you said, grounded state. And I would argue that anybody in a grateful, happy, a little more light state plays better. People who are in a good mood play better at basketball than when they're depressed. So it's just a good way to regulate emotions. And I think those two, bookending the day, a meditation in the morning and a journaling at night, is a surefire way to like up your mental performance for sure.
I love that. And I'm definitely going to start doing that with my meditation, because I've tried so many different things. I've tried the guided meditation has seemed to help more than trying to do it on my own, because I've talked to some people and they've tried to give me some advice, and I've struggled with it because, like I said, it's hard for me to turn it off. There's so many things, and journaling helps with that, but not as much as the meditation would. So I know I'm going to take some of that advice for sure. Now, last question I got for you. We kind of already touched on it, but maybe if you could think of something different, that'd be nice. If not, it is what it is. Now, what is one non-negotiable thing that you do every day? It could be like a habit or a routine. Obviously, we talked about journaling, meditation, things like that, but maybe something different than that. And it could be something little that, maybe has nothing to do with that. Just something, I feel like we all have, that thing, whether it's subconscious or not. Maybe you wake up or, during the day you do something every day that you don't even realize you're doing. If it's going on a walk or, maybe going out to eat with your mom. I don't know. Everyone's different. But what's that one thing for you? And like I said, if maybe we could try to keep it away from what we've just been talking about, because obviously those are kind of givens.
Totally. So I have a dog. So every single day, man, I'm walking that dog multiple times a day, playing with him. He's a good, like, you could do everything right. You could have the right diet. You could be dialed in, doing your meditation. You could be disciplined, hitting your goals. But if there's not some play factor in your life, if there's not some part of your life that makes you smile and laugh, I feel like, for me at least, it's easy to feel like, what am I doing this for? Like where is the benefit of putting all this work in if I'm not enjoying my life? And so my dog is a really good way for me to take life a little less serious and go play tug of war. That's why I have this thing on my nose. He headbutted me yesterday. But I walk him every day, man, and that's a non-negotiable, and that just gets me out of my head. And then I wear this watch, and every day at 5:30, something buzzes on it. I don't know why, but I've taken that to be my cue to pray. And I didn't grow up religious, and but I have gotten so much more connected with like my spirituality, since that age of like 22. Like I said, when I was most lost, I found really good. That is like one of the most important things in my life is my relationship to my inner guide, my inner spirit, and so around 5:30 every day, I will just pray. And sometimes praying for me just means, I didn't grow up religious. So honestly, this is all just like what I have found to make me feel good about my life is sometimes prayer is just like, thank you for the day I've been having. Like today was awesome. Sometimes when I'm having a bad day, prayer is just like, can you just take these problems and like, I'm going to trust that something greater than me is taking care of them, and just surrendering control or thanking is for me just super nourishing and makes me feel like, puts me back in a more grounded place. Cause sometimes we're in our heads and we feel like our world is just so big, and doing something like that where it takes me out of myself and looks to something greater than myself, I've found to be like a non-negotiable and super helpful.
I love it. I love it. And before I let you go, tell everybody where to find you on social media, because you're a great follow on everything. So let people plug all your social media, and then I'll let you get out of here.
Thanks, brother. At Max W. McCoy on Instagram. I try to post, stuff in this realm. And then my podcast is called Looking Up, and it's a cool place where I get to talk to really smart people and pick their brains around these ideas.
Yeah, definitely follow him on Instagram. Listen to his podcast. I really, really enjoyed that last episode. So I really, really appreciate you coming on, man. It means a lot.
Thank you, man. How have you found the podcasting process, man? Like you've done a really good job interviewing. I felt super comfortable, and I'm curious.
I'll be honest. I talk to a lot of different minds, every day, and a lot of the times it started with basketball. It was like, I want to talk to this coach, I want to talk to that coach, and then it got to the point where I was like, I'm kind of calling these coaches, and we're having these conversations, and no one else is listening to him. It's just me and him, and it was one of them things where I wanted to provide some value. And I love talking, I love picking people's brains, about different subjects. And then now it's to the point where I've kind of almost rebranded it, because I want it to be more than that, because the older I get, player development, that's what I do, but the older I get, the more kind of, I don't know how to describe it, the more I evolve, I guess would be a good way to put it, is it's not just Anthony and basketball, it's Anthony and improvement. And an improvement in, like all the categories we just talked about. So I just think, honestly, it was something that I really was interested in. I love listening to him, and I was like, hey, why can't I do that? Cool. I think I'm going to do it.
Podcasting, I ask because podcasting, we talk about personal development. Podcasting is a personal development tool, man. And even if you don't have a huge audience, and that's not why I wanted to just talk to people, and I wanted to pick the brains of people that I found interesting. And so
yep.
I think you have a really good talent at that. You had the courage to do it. And so, man, you are practicing what you preach, man. This is a personal development tool to pick people's brains, to reach out, to set these things up. It's like you're getting a master's degree directly from people. So hats off to you, man.
Exactly. Thanks, man. Again, I appreciate you, and definitely stay in touch. I would like to stay connected if you're cool with it.
Of course, man. Yeah, let me know any